Assalamu alaikum and hello to my non-Muslim viewers. Today I'm going to make a very quick video explaining the context of the Quran chapter 9 verse 1 through 28 and the Quran chapter 9 verse 78. So let's begin. The context behind that whole surah or that whole chapter is at a time of war. Now some Christian apologists and some critics of Islam and various atheists or any kind of critic of Islam, it doesn't matter if they're atheist or Christian, they'll say, well, the final marching orders or the final orders of the Quran were chapter 9, where the Prophet Muhammad is told to fight Jews and Christians and pagans and stuff like that. And it is true that the Quran chapter 9 was the last revealed surah or the last revealed chapter of the Quran. That's true. I'm not denying that, but I'm saying you got to look at the context of that chapter or that surah of the Quran. Context is key to understanding religious text, just like context is key to understanding various biblical verses and stuff like that. If I take something out of the Bible and out of context and throw it out there to spin my own interpretations, Jews and Christians wouldn't like that. They would say, well, or they wouldn't take me seriously. They would say you got to read everything in context and stuff like that. Same thing with the Quran. We have to read the Quran in its proper context. We can't just rip things out and just throw it out there and spin our own interpretations. Like I said, with the Hadith, it doesn't work that way. With the Hadith, it doesn't work that way with the Quran. But anyways, the whole reason why that chapter was revealed in the first place was because of the pagans of Arabia, the pagan Quraysh, and the pagans of Arabia who are attacking the early Muslims and the Prophet Muhammad. So that's the whole reason, that's the whole context behind the Quran chapter 9 verse 1 through 28. It's basically referring to the pagan Quraysh. It's not referring to future generations of non-Muslims or Jews or Christians or pagans or anything like that. It was revealed at a particular place in response to a particular people, and that particular people they don't exist today. They were the pagan Quraysh. Obviously there's no pagan Quraysh today, so it doesn't exist anymore. So those verses of the Quran chapter 9, which the critics keep bringing up, like the Quran chapter 9 verse 5, if you read Tafsir Ibn Kathir, and Tafsir Ibn Kathir is a important Sunni Muslim commentator on the Quran. According to Tafsir Ibn Kathir on Quran chapter 9 verse 5, it was revealed in response to the pagan Quraysh or the pagan idolaters who were fighting against the Prophet Muhammad. And another thing the critics don't quote is the Quran chapter 9 verse 6, where it says, if the pagans don't fight against you or they seek protection, then grant them protection. Again, this is the Quran chapter 9 verse 6. So Ibn Kathir interprets that verse saying that if the pagans are offering peace, or they don't want to fight, or they're offering a peace treaty or whatever, then the early Muslims and Prophet Muhammad has to take that request for peace seriously. So that's the whole context behind the Quran chapter 9 verse, the whole context behind the Quran chapter 9. And other verses in the Quran chapter 9 were revealed to address particular places and particular people who were coming up to the Prophet Muhammad and stuff like that. For example, the disbelievers and the hypocrites, in the Quran chapter 9 verse 78, is in response to the pagans and the disbelievers of Arabia. It's not that verse isn't talking about like it's not that verse isn't talking about in the future Muslims should implement that verse to fight disbelievers or hypocrites. That's not the verse. That's not why the verse was revealed. The verse was revealed because the disbelievers and hypocrites in the last year of the Prophet Muhammad's life were still fighting against them. That's why it was revealed. It wasn't randomly revealed to inspire future generations of Muslims to fight unbelievers. That's not the reason and why it was revealed. Now, what about peaceful verses in the Quran? Some critics of Islam will say, well, the peaceful verses of the Quran were abrogated, like the Quran chapter 109, etc., etc. Is this true? No, it isn't. Scholars like Ibn Kathir and Ibn Taymiyyah and others have said that no, it's not abrogated, or other Sunni Muslim scholars say that there's no evidence that those verses were abrogated. The theory of abrogation is where one verse cancels out another. It's not a clear concept, because Muslims, even Muslim scholars after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, they didn't know which verses abrogated the other. So it's misleading to say that the final marching orders or the final orders of the Quran were chapter 9, because in the other peaceful verses that came before it, like the Quran chapter 109 and the Quran chapter 60 verse 8, were abrogated in favor of the Quran chapter 9. There's no evidence. No Muslim scholar supports that. There's no evidence for that. So the peaceful verses of the Quran still stand today, 1400 years later, because there's no evidence that the Prophet Muhammad said, the final orders, my final orders to be carried out is the Quran chapter 9, and forget about those other verses. The Prophet Muhammad never said that. There's no hadith supporting that. So, and then, there's the whole no compulsion in religion verse that wasn't abrogated. For example, we have a story where Umar Ibn Khattab quoted the Quran chapter 2 verse 228 where it says no compulsion in religion. He quoted it after the death of the Prophet, so that's further proof that there's no that verse, no compulsion in religion, still applies today. So you can't compel people to become Muslim or stay Muslim. If they leave Islam, you can't do anything about it. You can't kill them, because then you're compelling them to remain a Muslim, and that contradicts the Quran. And Muslims can't contradict the Quran, because Muslims believe the Quran is the word of God. So you can't contradict the word of God if you're a believing Muslim. So the claim that the final marching orders of Islam, or the final orders of Islam, was the Quran chapter 9 is that overthrows all the peaceful verses like the Quran chapter 60 verse 8 and the no compulsion in religion Quranic verse, and Quran chapter 109, and several other peaceful verses where the Quran says you can live peacefully with non-believers is false. There's no evidence for that. So we have to look at the proper context of the Quran chapter 9 and why it was revealed. It was revealed that whole chapter of the Quran was revealed. The whole Quran chapter 9 was revealed at a particular place, involving a particular people, involving particular circumstances. Like I said in the previous video, where it was in regards to the Battle of Tabuk, where the Romans were going to attack the Muslims first, in the Battle of Mu'tah, and the final battles of the Quraysh, and the Battle of Hunain and stuff like that. Anybody has to do is just read the commentaries, read Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Tafsir Ibn Abbas, Tafsir Al-Zamakhshari, and Tafsir Al-Qurtubi regarding the verses or regarding the context of Quran chapter 9, and you'll see that the context is at the time of war, when Muslims were still in danger, when the Prophet Muhammad and the early Muslims were still being attacked by the pagan Quraysh and the Romans and the hypocrites and stuff like that. People were still attacking the early Muslims in the final stages of in the final years of the Prophet Muhammad's life, when he was 62 or 63. There were still attacks being made against the early Muslim community. So that's the whole context behind the Quran chapter 9. And another good biography to read and for further references for the context of the Quran chapter 9 would be this biography, the Sealed Nectar, where the Muslim scholar provides evidences for all of what I'm talking about and stuff like that. And I'll get into that in a later video. I'm trying to keep this video short. And another good another good biography to read would be Ibn Hisham, where Ibn Hisham basically, confirms what I'm saying behind the context, behind the Quran chapter 9. So that's my video regarding the context of the Quran chapter 9. Stay tuned for further videos. Salam.